Alright, today I will be presenting fluid mechanical damping of a MEMS based sound detection sensors. So first we will look at the design of the sensor, and then we will look at some simulation and measured responses and describe the damping effect on MEMS sensor. And at the end I will summarize the results. So this MEMS sensor is fabricated using silicon on insulator process, and that process starts with the substrate, which is a 400 micrometer thick, and then we put a layer of silicon on the top of substrate, and that layer is a 25 micrometer thickness, and then we fabricate the sensor on the top of the silicon layer. And this sensor is the same as a cantilever. So it has a fixed end, which is shown here, and the other end is released. It's free to move, so it can oscillate in the vertical plane. And then at the end we have a comb finger capacitors, so that are used for electronics readout of the sensor. So we fabricated two sensors, and these two sensors are exactly same. The only difference between these sensors are comb finger gaps. So the comb fingers are shown here. So the gap between these comb fingers, so one sensor has a 5 micrometer gap and other sensor has a 10 micrometer gap. Ideally these comb fingers, they move back and forth like this, but in our design here they didn't come up like that. So they are not overlapping. So they are at an angle like this, so they don't go through like this. So that is because of residual stress. And in this graph we have shown frequency response and directional response of the sensor. So for the frequency response, you can see this is a very narrow peak, and that's used for narrow frequency sound detection. And it works on at resonance frequency. And the back of the sensor is open, so it can move freely in vertical plane, and that provides cosine dependence. So it works as a differential microphone. So in this sensor we have a back is open, so when the sound hits on the front, and then it travels to the other side, and that path length difference is given by L, and that's the pressure difference. That's why it's a pressure differential sensor, and it has a cosine dependence, and the directionality is shown in this graph here. So next we look at experimental data for these two sensors. 5 micrometer shown in red, and 10 micrometer gap is shown in blue. And we observed two main observations there, and one is the resonance frequency is shifted for those two graphs. So that's due to the mass of the wing. So for 5 micrometer gap we can fit more comb fingers, and that increase the mass of the sensor. And due to increase of the mass, we can see from this equation here, the frequency is going to go lower. So that's why red graph is shifted to the left, and the blue one is shifted to the right. And second observation we made, the red one has a wider peak width than the blue one, and that is due to the viscous damping of the sensor. And then we study the damping using the finite element modeling console program. And we model the damping using this equation here. It has viscosity area divided by the gap between the comb fingers. So if we decrease the gap like 5 micrometer compared to 10, the damping goes higher. And that's why the peak in 5 micrometer is wider than the 10 micrometer. So once we studied using simulation, then we overlaid our experimental data on the top of these graphs. So that's the red one. and you can see they are not matching. And the next step we did, we incorporated the drag damping. So drag damping is not just due to the palm fingers, it's to the whole being. So when we apply that one, we use this equation here, which has a CD is a drag coefficient, viscous the density of the air, area of the palm fingers, and the speed. So once we incorporated drag damping, then we find the experimental data and the simulation data are in agreement. So the mainly for this configuration of the sensors, the damping comes from the drag damping, not from viscous damping of the palm fingers. So in this study we fabricated two sensors. One is a 5 micrometer and second one is a 10 micrometer sensor. And we looked at simulation responses and experimental responses. So for the simulation, first we tried with the viscous damping, and we find the peak widths for one sensor was narrow than the other one. Then when we overlaid the experimental data on the top of that, we figured out it's not matching, and then we tried the drag damping in the simulation, and we find out this drag damping is match the experimental data. All right, any questions?
So now that you've learned this, what's your next step?
So next step is, next step from this one, we have to close the back of the switch. Sensor has an open back, and it only works, so we need two sensors to find the direction. So now next step is we're going to close the back of the sensor, and so then it gives us two motions like back and forth like this, and it also twist when we close the back. And that way we can use one sensor to find the direction. So that's the next step we have.
Will this have any application to my iPhone?
Yes. So if you want to know, like let's say you are, I think some of the applications, like the popular ones are detecting snipers and sound detection, any kind of sound detection. Like if you want to detect any insect making sound somewhere, you can detect that one, where the sound is coming from. Or if somebody is speaking, hiding someplace, and you want to know where they are, you can use these sensors too. It's very small, so you can fit in the iPhone, and you can find the exact direction to. Right now we have a 2-degree accuracy, what we tested, so you can find the right location. Otherwise, right now we need a very big system to find direction, and systems called, like for the sniper detection, it's called about $25 million. So this one will be much cheaper and very small.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. Good afternoon, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guest, and especially Parminder, who is presenting from the Technical Presentations Manual on presenting a technical paper. The objectives were to deliver an interesting speech based on a technical paper or article, effectively use a Microsoft PowerPoint, which he did beautifully to illustrate his theme, and provide additional information such as answers to questions using a flip chart. And he did take some questions. And his personal objective that we met with before coming up to speak, before he spoke, was checking on his clarity of speech and making sure I could understand and hear what he was saying. Great strengths. I noticed that you had great eye contact throughout the entire speech. You touched on all of the rooms, although it was a little bit heavier on the right side. Maybe it was because you were standing on this side that it just tended to be towards the right. Visual aids were great. The manual recommended using words and pictures and math, and you had all of those things in there. What I particularly like about your pictures is that I could read the X and Y axis. You had arrows pointing to the important things on each picture, so we weren't, what am I looking at? and body language. I really appreciated the image of the combs, how that was working, and you used different motions to show us what was happening with the MEMS. For improvement, I noticed that you were speaking to the screen a few times, and so maybe a pointer or a laser pointer, or look and point and then speak. That was the big, I think on a few slides, you were talking to the screen and it was kind of hard to understand and couldn't tell that you were talking to us. And also, if there are any assumptions and limitations, just as being a technical piece, I'm not sure if there were any assumptions or limitations, but that might be something that I'd be interested in learning about if you're doing simulation. What were some of the assumptions and limitations of those simulation runs? And the positive, what I love about all of your presentations, your speeches, as you've gone through this technical manual, is that it's evident that you're passionate about this subject and you're really interested in your work. And so I know that when you're coming up here to present on your work, that you're going to show interest, and it's not something that is painful for you to do. So I greatly appreciate it and I look forward to hearing about it more. Thank you.